Hello everyone and welcome back. My name is Julia and I'm from Giulia Rose Knits. Thanks for joining me today. This is our part 2 of a full tutorial series of how to knit my pattern, the cabin socks. Today's tutorial is going to be all about color work. So let's go ahead and just jump right in. So in part 1 of the tutorial, I showed you how to make a slip knot, do the long tail cast on, and do the invisible join for knitting in the round. And then I started to knit the knit 2 purl 2 ribbing. We had some bonus content of how to undo our stitches called tinking. Because if you watched it, you'll know that I made a mistake and I had to go back. But I left off knitting the cuff, so here I have the finished cuff. I knit in the knit 2 purl 2 rib for about an inch, so I have about an inch of the cuff here. And now I need to start the leg of my pattern. And this is where the color work begins. So I will be following the color work chart of the size that I am knitting. In part 2 of this tutorial series, I will be showing you how to read a color work chart, how to work with more than one color of yarn. I'll also briefly describe a concept called yarn or color dominance. I will also be demonstrating how to catch your floats on the back of your work for those charts that will require you to knit more than 3 to 4 stitches of one color in a row. And I'll discuss main color versus contrast color. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So here I have my color work chart. If you've purchased the pattern, you know that I actually have 4 different color charts that you will use depending on which size you are knitting. So this is chart A. This has a 10 stitch and 12 row repeat in the color work pattern. Because we are knitting in the round, we are only working on the right side of the work. So normally knitting charts will alternate between the right side, wrong side, and then we'll go again, right side, wrong side. But because we're only knitting on one side, we're only knitting on the right side. So every row corresponds to a right side row, which means we are going to be reading every row from right to left, just like that. One of the first things you'll notice when you look at this chart that there are 2 different colors used. So in my pattern, I use this gold color as my main color and the red color as the contrast color. Of course, the colors that you use will be different or can be different. This works with any colors. So you just need to decide which color is going to be your main color and which color is going to be your contrast color. That is really important, and you'll keep that the same and consistent throughout the entire pattern. So each box corresponds to 1 stitch. So that means that this has 10 stitches in a repeat and then 12 rows, like I mentioned. So the first 5 stitches, you can see here, since I'm reading from right to left, are going to be with your contrast color, and this is my red color. After you knit 5 stitches with your contrast color, then we alternate from main color, contrast, main color, contrast, main color. So you just follow this chart as you knit. And then when you get to the last row, you just start back over from row 1. So for a chart pattern like this, if there's 10 stitches, if you're having a hard time keeping track of where you are, I like to find something to cover the rows that I'm not working on. So in my case, I use my iPad Pro. Of course, not everyone is going to have that. That's totally okay. If you're working with actual physical paper, just take another blank sheet of paper and lay it across the chart and then just move it up as you go. And then another thing you can do if you're having trouble keeping track of the actual stitches as you go through the row, you can put a stitch marker at the end of the pattern repeat. So that would be at stitch 10 here. And that way you would actually just divide your stitches by 10, and it makes it a little bit easier to follow along. Of course, for some of the other charts, especially for the 4x8 chart, which I have here, that is not going to be maybe as helpful because you'll have stitch markers every 4 stitches. I think it's a lot easier with a chart this small to just kind of knit according to the chart. Okay, so we know that we are going to knit from the right to the left for every row. Just like that. But what happens if we have 3 or more stitches in a row of the same color, as we will have here and over here? That's where we will need to catch or trap our floats. And I recommend doing that every like 3 to 4 stitches. But you are going to want to stagger them, and I'll demonstrate all of this. And I'll show you how to trap your floats. For a chart that only has maybe 3 stitches in a row of the same color, you won't need to trap your floats. Okay, so we can go ahead and get started now. Instead of knitting in a knit 2 purl 2 pattern for the cuff, we're going to knit all of our stitches now, and we're going to start the color work according to the color chart that we are using. I just so happen to be using the 4x8 color chart, and that one does not require you to catch your floats, but I will still be demonstrating that. So I've removed my beginning of round marker because I'm going to be switching to my larger size needles. So I knit the cuff with a US 1, and I'm transferring them now to a US 2. And you will just be using whichever size needles that you got gauge with. So I remove my beginning of round marker when I'm moving all of my stitches to a different needle. It's just gonna fall off anyway. So my pattern calls for 3 red stitches to be knit, followed by 1 gold stitch. And that's the full repeat for the 4x8 chart. And before you get started, make sure you orient yourself correctly. So I'm going to be working with my 2 balls of yarn now, my 2 colors. I want to make sure that I keep the gold on my left and the red ball on my right side. And depending which color you choose as your dominant color, you want your dominant color to be on the left. So my main color, which just so happens to be my dominant color as well, I'm going to move that to the left. And then I'm going to keep my red ball on the right. And because I have to start with a red stitch, I'm just going to move my gold yarn out of the way. Grab my contrast color. You want a little bit of a tail for weaving in the ends later. And then I'm just going to insert my right needle as if I'm going to knit as usual. I make a little loop, and I put that loop onto my needle and pull through. Okay, and that is my first stitch. And make sure you're doing that on your sized up needles. So you're working with 2 different circular needles or a few different DPNs at this point. So I need 2 more red. 1, 2. And then I need a yellow. So I hold my yarn when I'm working with 2 colors. I hold my yarn in both hands. I hold my non-dominant color in my right hand and my dominant color in my left hand. Some people knit with both colors in their left hand. I would say it's like kind of almost a 50-50 split, but who really knows? So, but I knit this way. Make sure there's lots of yarn strands kind of all in the middle, all around. I like to put my my tail in the center of like the sock and just pull that through the bottom, just so it's kind of out of the way. There we go. So now we only have those 2 strands. All right, so I have 3 red and I need 1 yellow or gold. And that is my pattern repeat. If you're working with a different chart, it will be different. But this is the 4x8 chart. So I'm just gonna keep going. 1, 2, 3. Okay. And here's where I want to demonstrate or show you in practice what the non-dominant and dominant color means. So as I mentioned, my dominant color is holding or is on my left. It's always going to stay on the left side of my contrast or non-dominant yarn. What that looks like on the back is the yellow color is always traveling underneath my non-dominant color. You see that? How it's underneath? So when I pick my yellow color, it's underneath my red color. And that's actually what gives it that dominant appearance. So if I switched that at any time, that's when my finished work will start to look a little bit wonky. You really want to make sure that you're keeping it, your dominant color is always traveling underneath your non-dominant. So when I wrap that one, look, that is still on top. Still on top of that dominant color. Just gonna knit a few more. This one. One more time, I'll show you. Traveling underneath. So what happens when we have to carry a color of yarn across the back of our work that we're not knitting with for 3 or 4 or 5 stitches? I will show you here, even though I'm not knitting in that pattern, but this is just for demonstrating purposes. So I'm gonna knit 3 stitches in my red. And you'll see that because I'm not working with my yellow yarn, when I knit with that again, it's going to be carried across the back of our work. So if you don't trap your floats, so I'm gonna knit 5 stitches without trapping my float, and then I'll knit 1 with the yellow. Look what happens on the back. So we have this very long carried float, and this is something you don't want. This is why we trap our floats. These are nice and short, they're close to your work, and you know, they're much less likely to get snagged and pulled by something. So that's why we trap our floats. So I'm gonna go back a few stitches. Okay, so now I'm back to, I only have 3 red stitches here, but let's say I need 5. So here's where I want to trap my left-handed or my yellow strand of yarn. So to do that, it is a different process for trapping a right float as it is for your left-handed float. And I'm gonna demonstrate a few different ways to do this. If you hold a strand of yarn in each of your hands, this is how you trap that left hand float. So I'm gonna go into my next stitch as I would normally to knit. And then I'm going to bring this yellow strand that I'm not knitting with to the very front of my work. See what I did there? So you're bringing it from the back and you're just bringing it over both of those needles, just like that. And then you're gonna wrap your yarn as you would to knit it, bring that strand back, and then pull through. And look at that, you've trapped that float. So now when I knit another 2 red, or 1, because I had 4 and then I needed 5, and then I knit 1 yellow, I'm not going to have that super long float carried across the back of my work, and you'll see this is where I trapped that yellow color right there. So now I'll show you how we trap the right hand float. So let's say that I need 5 stitches in my gold color. So I'm gonna knit 3, 1, 2, 3. To trap my right hand float, it's a little bit trickier, but once you get the hang of it, it's really, really easy. So you're gonna insert your right needle into your stitch as you would to knit it. You're going to wrap the red strand just as you would to knit it, and then bring your left strand onto that back needle as well, and then bring that red strand back. Pull through. Let me show you that one more time. So we're going to go into the stitch as if to knit, wrap with your right strand, wrap with your left, wrap with your left, unwrap, and pull through. Show you one more time, just a little bit faster. So I do wrap, wrap my left, unwrap, and there you go. So what about my people who knit holding both strands in your left hand? I have to use a knitting thimble because I don't normally knit this way, and this helps me tension the yarn, so apologies for that. But the yarn dominance and color dominance works essentially the same way, even if you're knitting this way. You still want your dominant color to be left of your non-dominant color regardless. The one main difference in knitting with both strands in your left is that when you have to pick the right strand, you need to make sure that you go over both strands. Don't go under the yellow strand or that first strand to get to your right strand. You want to make sure, oops, sorry, just gonna tension this a little bit better. You want to make sure that you're going over both of those strands and picking that right strand. What happens when you go underneath is actually the same process that you use for trapping your float. So I have 4 stitches here, so this is actually a good place to trap my left float if I need to knit another red strand. So what you do is that's when you go under that left strand. You normally go over to pick the right, but we're gonna go under the left and over that red to pull that through. And then the yarn actually gets twisted. So what happens when you knit normally, again, you want to go over because we've already trapped it. We don't want to trap it again. We've trapped it on this stitch here. Trapping a right float is again a little bit tricky, but it's still doable as all of them. So to trap a right float, we're gonna go into the stitch as usual, over top both strands, bring that to the front, and then we're gonna go over the left strand and under the right strand and pull that through. And we've trapped our red strand underneath our yellow strand. So I'm gonna show you that again. Into the stitch, as usual, over both strands, and then over the yellow, over the left, and under the right. And then pull that through. Can use your finger to tension it if you need to. I find that it helps me, especially when I'm knitting in a way that I don't normally knit, so I apologize. So again, it will twist your strands, and that is okay because you're going to untwist it here. So knit one with the left strand, and now they're no longer twisted, and that is where your right strand is trapped. All right, so I'm gonna return to my normal style of knitting. You got your rope there? Yeah? Nice. Hey, Boof. Say hi, Boof. Ooh, okay, that's better. I'm gonna undo a few of these stitches that I made out of pattern for demonstrating purposes. Okay. Boof is really excited because she is hunting for her rope. She loves her little rope to hunt. She's super cute. Okay, so now I am back in my pattern of 3 red, 1 yellow, 3 red, 1 yellow. So just another tip while working color work is when you do carry floats, it causes your work to, let me get my sock here. It causes your work to kind of pull in. And if you remember in part 1, I showed you where I caught my floats. I'm trying to find that spot. Here it is. Okay, I showed you where I caught my floats right on top of each other. So it gives you this not even tension when you do that. So when you trap your floats, as I just demonstrated, you want to make sure that you're looking at where you trapped them on the previously knit round. And if you trapped a float right in that same spot you want to trap another time, I would say you either trap right before that stitch or right after, so you're staggering them nicely like this. And then we have much better tension on this side than we have right there. There it is. Okay, another way to get nice even tension while working color work is to spread your stitches out on your right needle, especially when you're about to knit with a color for the first time in like a few stitches. So let's see. I knit 1, 2, 3. And then before I knit again with my yellow one, I make sure they're nice and spread out. And what that does is it increases the distance that the gold strand needs to travel to go into this stitch. If my stitches are all bunched up, it doesn't have to go very far. And then you're gonna get this super tight float here. You want it to be nice and spaced out, because if it is cinched like that, it's gonna pull your stitches in. It's gonna make your work really stiff, and you're gonna get really uneven tension. So before I knit with my yellow strand, I make sure those are nice and spread out, and then I knit there. And now I have a really good distance and length of that float. So I just finished all the stitches on my left hand needle. I'm still transferring to my other larger size needle, if you remember. So now I have basically 2 different needle sets that I'm working with. I pull the stitches I haven't worked with, push those onto the needle, and then I pull these ones down. So I'm working magic loop. It's gonna feel pretty clumsy. You're gonna have all these cables and things. If you're working with DPNs, this is probably a bit easier of a part. Let me just get set up here. I need to start with a red stitch. So I pinch the cable and the needle tip together so we don't get like a big gap there. And I'm gonna go into my first stitch. I need a red. Make sure you're pinching that nice and close there. Pull that through. I need one more red. Okay, and I think that should be all for part 2 of this series tutorial. In part 3, I will have the leg portion of the sock knit up, and then I will show you how to separate your stitches to knit the short row heel. And then I'll go through the shadow wrap short rows, how to knit that heel, and how to rejoin your heel stitches to your instep stitches. So that will be next time. I'm just going to sit here and keep knitting until I see you guys again. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Make sure you subscribe so you can get notified when part 3 comes out. Follow me on Instagram. I have a lot of other tutorials that I put on there that are just kind of more short form videos. And I will see you next time. Bye.